certificate in the way that this amendment proposes?
My Lords, it has to be said that when I talk to members of the general public and tell them that it's MOJ policy to allow prisoners of a male sex to be housed according to their self-declared gender identity in a women's prisons, irrespective of whether they've taken any legal or medical steps to acquire their gender, that they don't need to have gone through any physical transformation and still retain male genitalia, which we've heard lots and lots and lots about already in this debate, that they don't need to have obtained a gender recognition certificate even. They just need to declare that they are women and demand that they're moved to the women's estate and it's seriously considered. When members of the general public hear this, they are aghast. It falls under the category of, has the world gone mad? That common sense response may not feel appropriate when discussing legislation, but I think in this instance it may help us to look at this issue in practical real-life terms, not just in abstractions, and that's why I welcome very strongly this amendment. While the amendment doesn't resolve all of my concerns, I welcome in a way the modest, narrow aim it has of removing the most egregious aspect of this situation, i.e. allowing male prisoners who identify as trans but have convictions of violence or sexual offences against women to live with women prisoners. There really is no point in this government issuing strategies and grand words about violence against girls and women if the same government has no qualms about letting rapists share the same confined living quarters as vulnerable women in prison who, let's be frank, can't leave, can't escape because they're locked up by the state. So this amendment's focus is on convicted sex offenders, and it's urgent that the government takes notice. An important note here: when gender-critical commentators and academics raise qualms about the general policy of housing transgender prisoners in the women's estate, they are often dubbed transphobic and accused of holding a prejudiced view of all trans women as sexual predators. But this is a malign caricature, and can I at this point give a shout-out of solidarity to Professor Joe Phoenix, an esteemed and conscientious criminologist who's been harassed and traduced for raising such legitimate concerns. But wherever one stands on this issue, on the general issue, this amendment is specific and cannot be accused of implying that all natal men, however they identify, are per se a sexual threat to women, because that wouldn't be true. We are only talking here about convicted sex offenders, those guilty of violence. However, I still hope this probing amendment might encourage the government to look more closely at a range of issues in this area. I particularly want the government to consider whether the Ministry of Justice's involvement with the controversial lobbying group Stonewall, already been referred to by the Noble Baroness Mayer, whether that involvement in Stonewall with the MOJ over a period of time, as with so many public bodies, may, just may, have led to the skewing of policies in a particular direction. For example, I know how keen this government is on data and statistics. But as Kate Coleman, the founder of Keep Prisons Single Sex, has noted, and this just seems incredible to me, the MOJ admits that it doesn't know how many prisoners identify as trans because with a gender recognition certificate, they are counted by their new legal gender. So I'm not sure how Baroness Brinton can be so sure of the statistics that she quotes, because the tools designed to assess any threat posed by male prisoners who identify as trans women can't be picked up accurately. If someone with a GRC attacks a female prisoner, it will be recorded as an assault by a woman on another woman. I also want to query who is listened to in this discussion and what is obviously a clash of rights. In the course of that recent High Court ruling that we've heard about, Lord Justice Holroyd outlined the need to balance, quote, the subjective concern of women prisoners with the rights of transgender women in the prison system, which made it sound as though the women, the biological women, were all being overly subjective and the transgender women had rights. But describing one side as subjective and the other with rights misses a crucial point, because actually that transgender woman has an identity that is not an objective fact, but a subjective desire and then a declaration. Why are women prisoners, their subjective but rational concerns, afforded less weight here? Also, when the High Court acknowledged that women prisoners may well be worried and scared about sharing prison accommodation with male-bodied prisoners, the court said that that fear was not enough to outweigh, quote, the desire of some male prisoners to be housed with women. But I wonder, when did the prisoner state, or indeed the law, allow its policies to be dictated by prisoners' desires? Having worked with prisoners over a number of years, particularly with Debating Matters Beyond Bars, who many of the prisoners I've worked with have demanded that they desire decent prison education, they desire retraining, they desire better conditions. And I can tell you now, the prison authorities certainly didn't accommodate to their desires. So why then these desires are accommodated to when it comes to the trans issue? Finally, I'm keen that the government look carefully and use this probing motion to do so at how staff in prisons understand the issue of sex and gender in the context of training being used. In the MOJ policy entitled The Care and Management of Individuals Who are Transgender, it advises staff to complete an e-learning module on transgender identity, and one of the training courses is named Intersecting Identities. Having looked at these, it all rather terrifies me. It's one-sided, jargon-ridden, ideological. I'm hoping that this amendment might point to the government to raise this issue and review the whole issue. But for now, at least, a very modest amendment should be taken seriously if you really mean that you care about protecting women from violent men.